Welcome to the Riveo Impact Lab, the podcast in which we explore what it means for small businesses to have real impact in an evolving world. On this podcast, we engage our curiosity around topics like sustainability, diversity and inclusion, and the ethical outcomes of our decisions, all from a small business perspective.
I'm Ellen, and this is my co-host, Emily.
Yeah, this month we want to talk about creators in media, so filmmakers, television producers, radio presenters, and podcast hosts all have an incredible amount of influence on the world, mostly by shaping public perceptions and opinions around any given topic. So this is a responsibility that we at our production company, Riveo Creative, and at the Riveo Impact Lab take extremely seriously. As we always say, storytelling is often the most effective way of communicating ideas, and media is the vehicle through which individuals receive their stories.
This month, we are sharing our interview with filmmaker Sergio Rapu, owner of Mara Films and director of the feature-length documentary Eating Up Easter. This documentary explores the history of Rapa Nui, otherwise known as Easter Island, via the stories of 4 islanders. The documentary delves into the effects of modern development on the island as the native people seek to preserve their culture and protect their environment. As a native to the island himself, Sergio brings an important level of depth to the documentary, which we will discuss more with him in the interview. Sergio's company, Mara Films, says it creates emotional experiences to address social, economic, and environmental conflict in order to empower, enrich, and sustain life. Through our conversation with Sergio, you'll see how he and his company accomplished exactly that. Please enjoy filmmaker and early days Riveo Creative employee, Sergio Rapu. Sergio, I'm so happy to be talking to you.
It's good to connect with you.
After quite some time. This is really exciting. I want to talk with you and some of your thoughts about like filmmaking and storytelling and all the things. I've got lots of questions to ask you. Let's start way back at the beginning. How did you get started in this field in the first place?
Before I went to school for it, I think I was really exposed to just like cameras and video production at school, like early, like in 4th grade, I think I remember.
Like in 4th grade?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was in this class where, they let us like play with these old VHS things.
And this is in Hawaii?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was born on Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, as you know. And then around 3rd grade, my family and I, we moved to Hawaii, to the island of Oahu. And so it was kind of a odd time where I grew up speaking Spanish, but my mom taught me English. My mom's American. My dad's Rapa Nui. And so I entered into the 3rd grade, having to enter into sort of an English as a second language program. And I had friends that I started making were all in this other like gifted and talented class, it was called, where once a day or once a week, I forget, they like got to like skip out of class and go and like be in this magical land of like creation and art and experimentation and stuff. And I was like, I want to do that. But I was stuck in like the English as a second language program. So come 4th grade, I worked really, really hard, and I eventually kind of got into that program also. And really, I realized that like it's the access to the stuff, that kind of got me thinking about like, what is video? How can we do things? I think that was the first time I touched the video camera. I started working with it. And then in high school, I had a really influential teacher who he was an English teacher. His name is David McCullough. He's the son of sort of the historian David McCullough. And he taught this class about looking critically at films. And so we would watch, like these really old films, and read the books, if there were books and movies and stuff. And he would stop it on different frames in the film and say, look at this. Why do you think they framed it like this? Why do you think those props are the way that they are? And all of a sudden that started also making me understand it. Like, it's like really like it's an art, it's a craft, right? Like, especially in fictional films, um, everything is there for a reason. So why is it there for a reason? It's kind of like a poem you can like really dig deep down into, and watch a movie. If it's done really well, watch a movie multiple times and get sort of different meanings out of it. So that was also really exciting, and that kind of launched me into this idea of like, what if I did production? What if I made movies? So that was the initial spark, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love that. And I love thinking about the film frame, the framing and all the filmmaking as poetry. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's beautiful. And then, so then your, this passion took you to study filmmaking at college.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to go to Loyola Marymount University. It's a small college in LA, and really, spent that time learning a lot, learning about the craft and how do you shoot things and edit things and all of that. And I think like the best part of it came when I got a job on campus to help pay for my tuition, and it was within the camera rental department. So even though I was going to classes and taking the tests and all of that, really like day in and day out, I was touching equipment,
Hmm.
and I was like helping others learn about the equipment. And so then that also meant that like when friends of mine or other people needed help on their productions for their own projects, like who do you ask? Well, you ask the people that are like touching the equipment all the time. So then I was dragged on to work on film sets, which
Hmm.
really that was the majority of my learning. My learning was like doing. My learning was really sort of messing up on my own projects and on other people's projects, and then like learning from that. The theory stuff was wonderful and beautiful, but looking back now, it's like just the doing of things that really taught me a lot. That was really impactful. And after college, we all sort of in that camera department had dreams of being cinematographers, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna go and film beautiful movies. I had the same idea that like my high school teacher told me of like framing and shot composition and all of that stuff. And then you get out sort of into the world, the real world, another real world, right? Because we're all in different worlds, I would say. And you realize like how tough it is and how competitive it is and how grueling being on set is too. I think my first experience as a PA, being on set for 14 hours a day and stuff like that, I was like, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot of work. And seeing sort of just like the amount of work that goes into even being a camera assistant, not even being the person who's the cinematographer or the gaffer or any of that. Like people make their whole careers just setting up C-stands. I found myself kind of lacking that creative outlet by being a PA. I ended up sort of going back to Hawaii for a little bit and found this job like filming weddings, like funny enough, right? But it was a stable job. I used a camera every day. I filmed stuff. I edited it, and I had to do it over and over again very quickly. So like similar to my experience in school, I was again doing the thing, and it was sort of like a creative practice, and I could experiment with types of shots. And the combination between having to shoot something and edit it quickly was really important, because then I understood from the editing what are the shots you really need to make this work, the sequence work or the story work or whatever. Um, and then that really helps you in the shooting process and in the production process to not overshoot, you know that was many many years ago. Today I work in documentaries, and so much of that has like transferred over, that when I go out into the field and I'm I only have one shot to film the sequence that's going to happen in real life, right? They're not actors. What are the shots that I really need in order to make the sequence happen? Like that's stuff that I learned filming wedding videos in Hawaii.
Yeah, no, always learning, and that
Yeah.
experiential learning is really the most powerful, I find too. And you skipped over the part of the story. You skipped over the whole upstate New York part where you worked
Oh,
with us. You helped launch
well,
our company.
yeah. I mean, but that was part of it too, right? That was part of that learning.
But you came here, we met. You had a portfolio with the wedding videos and some travel videos you had done. And that really good, I forgot exactly what it was for, perhaps your aunt's nonprofit.
Whoa. Right.
What was
Yes.
that? That was really good.
My cousins actually, they started raising money to pay for cleft palate surgery
That's right.
for young children in Mexico. They had kind of in their travel, they traveled to Mexico just for vacation a lot, and they kind of came across this organization down there that was doing really great work, trying to support the community health wise. And so they started selling kitchen towels.
That's right. Yeah. And that video, that was a video you had made, and it just was so good. It made everybody cry and just want to give all the money to the organization because it was so powerful. And like that is really good storytelling that makes you want to then, do something, go find out more, or it changes you somehow.
To do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think video and film, however you want to call it, like it's an emotional medium. I talk about this a lot. We talk about this a lot when we're trying to ideate new series or specials, or whether it's for YouTube or big networks or whatever. It's like, is this the right medium for the story we're trying to tell? The story can be told in a book, in a magazine, just Facebook posts, pictures. Like, is this the right space? So what video and film is really good for is to hook that emotional element, of your audience, and hooking your audience to your characters and sort of building that relationship in a way that some of these other mediums can't, or do it differently.
Yeah. There's so many reasons for that. And, here we are, both of us still in the industry.
Right.
But I want to talk about your documentary, Eating Up Easter,
Oh,
that
sure.
you produced a few years ago. This has been a few years, right?
Eating Up Easter came out in 2018.
2018. Okay. And how did that project come about? That was very like personal to you and your
Yeah,
family.
yeah, yeah. I'm from Easter Island. I'm from Rapa Nui. By the start of that project took about 6 years to make. So development of it started around 2012. I think that was after we left New York and kind of moved back to Minneapolis. But really, I had started working more in just sort of feature length documentary work by then. I realized that I wanted to try and tell a present day story, a modern day story of our community on Rapa Nui. Right. So often people hear about Easter Island or Rapa Nui, and they just think of the stone statues or moai, right? And they have misconceptions about what the island is actually like, or what the statues are, or why they were made. And we see this constantly when people travel there and get off the plane, and then all of a sudden are hit with this like information shock, right? People assume that the island is deserted. People assume that everybody killed themselves, that it's a mystery what the statues mean or who built them, or concoctions around sort of like aliens coming and like building these statues. And what it does is undermines the real story. The real story is that the Rapa Nui, are alive, right? There's a thriving community on the island. We are the descendants of our ancestors are the carvers of those statues, and those statues have a very particular purpose or meaning within our culture. And so understanding that there's this sort of misconnect or disconnect between the audience and the story, I wanted to try and tell a modern day story about our community, to show that we are alive, to talk about sort of like the real issues that are happening on the island, many of which are connected to globalization, to mass tourism, to things like that. So really kind of open up the can of worms in a sense to that. And so we started, we named the film Eating Up Easter because initially it was going to be a film about food dependency. Rapa Nui imports 90% of all of the food that we eat on the island. And this isn't very different to other islands in the Pacific. Hawaii, for as big as it is, there's like 1 million people that live there. They import about 80%, right? So all of that comes in through ships and planes and stuff. There's very little self-sustaining element to these islands and these island communities. But as we started digging deeper, we realized that like there was a bigger story about the push and pull between a community, a really small community in the middle of the Pacific, who's trying to sort of develop and modernize and compete and connect with the outside world, and then also having to deal with the issues that the rest of the world deals with, right? Everything from like plastic trash to education to this push and pull of should we do it in old ways versus do it in new ways. So in the end, that's what the film turned out to be about. We identified a couple of characters that we followed throughout the course of 3 or 4 years, and then put it together and and sent it out. And it was it was my first film. It was kind of a really big learning process.
And it was well received. You got awards for this film, did you not?
Yeah. We
Yeah.
got a bunch of different awards. We played at several different film festivals here in the U.S. and across the world. We were also acquired by Independent Lens. It's a series on PBS, and so it was broadcasted nationwide in 2020. They still play it every once in a while, usually like around Earth Day or something like that. And it still keeps getting plays internationally also. So I think the BBC has played it, the different broadcasters in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, kind of all over. And then also really embraced by my community because they understood the importance, they saw the importance that outsiders were seeing the realities of Rapa Nui, right? So now, like the latest iteration of that is that a recent cruise ship called the Peace Boat that travels from Japan across the Pacific and lands on Rapa Nui played it for their 300 plus passengers. And one of the characters on the film, Enrique, also accompanied the cruise, right? So he played music for them at night. He spoke to them about the island. So then all of a sudden, instead of arriving, right, completely with this other idea of what they were coming to, they arrived with that knowledge and that understanding of like, this is where I'm going. And this is the impact that I'm going to have as a tourist. And this is how I can minimize that or change that by my behaviors that I take. But the critical part is always sort of shifting that mindset of the people who are creating the action. Are they fully educated? Do they fully understand, what they're stepping into?
Yeah, I love hearing that they're using the film in that way. That's powerful, innovative, and effective. Yeah, I'm sure that's really cool. I want to ask you, so like that story is a great example of like you were the right person to tell that story because that is your community. You had insight and access in a way that other filmmakers probably wouldn't. You had, background and understanding. That's a very special situation. How do you approach other stories when you aren't necessarily like of the community in the same way? What do you have a process around that?
Yeah, no, great question. I think this is becoming even more and more important. I think as us storytellers, we start, before it just used to be like, what story do we tell? How do we tell it? And I think the other sort of big question that we all ask ourselves is, are we the right people to be telling this story? Right?
Mm.
It's something I think that everybody needs to assess. I think the way that I approach it is really by starting that question. Am I the right person to be telling the story? And if my answer is I'm not sure or no, then it means then the secondary question is who should be the right person telling the story and how can I help that person tell this story? There's a lot of projects that I'm involved in now where I'm in a support role. I'm not directing it in a sense, but I am mentoring younger filmmakers. I am helping in the production in a different way. I'm reviewing cuts and giving notes. I'm finding, financing, distribution, and connection. Filmmaking is such a team sport that um, that there are so many different ways you could be an ally, right? Maybe that's a good word to use. An ally to the director, to the community that is trying to get their story out. So I think that that filter is incredibly important, and I think people, especially audiences now, are very sensitive to it. They'll ask like, "Who did this? Is this authentic to that person, to this community, or are people just being tokenized by somebody else?" Right, within the narrative. It's not to say that people can't help. It just means that you don't drive the boat.
Right.
Help somebody else drive the boat.
Why not work in the world of entertainment? Given, forget about the long days and everything, but it's really a choice to go in this other direction and work in the world of documentary filmmaking and work in the world where you are more likely to have an impact and see the shift in people. Like what caused you to really go in that direction?
I had this aha moment. I was in a conference. I think it was like a PBS conference, a public media conference, where I was early into sort of the documentary world. I had written scripts. I was trying to make a narrative, a fictional film done about Rapa Nui. And one of like my documentary counterparts there kind of made this like kind of tease me a little bit and be like, "Oh, are like real world stories like not good enough for you? You have to like make up some of your own or something like that." And I was like, I was taken aback a little bit by that. But then at the same time, it made me think a lot. It made me think a lot like, yeah, there are a lot of really incredible real world stories. Why do I just want to make some up out of like my own mind? Right. And so that really intrigued me to just kind of like explore nonfiction storytelling more in regards to like your question about impact. The term impact, we also have this conversation a lot in terms of sort of like the public media space, um, because the idea of impact versus audience engagement, sometimes people use it interchangeably, but it's very different, based on how you define it, right? Audience engagement is just a interaction with your audience, setting up tables at an event, handing out flyers, hearing feedback from them, things like that. Impact really has to do more with, is there a change that happened? The first change that we always look for in impact, or at least I look for, is a change in understanding or a change in perception. When an audience member, what did they think about the world before they watched my movie? What do they think about the world after they watched my movie? And whatever that shift is, that's like the most minuscule, but in many ways, like also the most critical part of impact, because it's the initial push, to get to maybe like a greater goal, right? It's like the thing you were talking about, Ellen. It's like how do we change the world in positive ways? How do we change society and to be healthier and happier and better and, more equitable and things like that. I think that there's ways that entertainment and fictional storytelling can have impact. It's I would say it's on a lot more of an emotional level where people are invited into a space where they can explore emotions of fictional characters in a sense, right? And understand their own emotions and maybe even process their own traumas or their own fears or whatever it is in that space. I think nonfiction, right, where documentary storytelling really works is when we can do both that emotional work and then also sort of like the mental work, understanding our world better through an emotional lens. Why do people do what they do? Why is this issue an issue that would impact everybody? But because these people live in a particular place or look a certain way or have particular religion or way of loving one another, like why are they treated differently, right? And so this is again like sort of this film medium, this video medium is building an emotional connection with people that maybe you wouldn't hang out with all the time, right? That don't look like your neighbors, that don't look like your family, and they're real, right? That's the biggest part of it. And they really lived or are living. So I think that just puts a bigger weight to the story. But it's also a lot trickier to make because you don't light it the same way. You don't have the big crews, you don't have the big budgets. You have to find sort of the emotion and the narrative arc within sort of the world that we live in, which there are stories, but really it's like that's where the craft of filmmaking comes in, where you really are able to chop it down in the edit and say this is how the story is going to follow, similar to a fictional arc but just in the nonfiction space.
Right. And you didn't even really talk about the time. When you've got a fictional movie you're shooting, you're talking about months of shooting, and a documentary, it's,
Yeah.
it could be decades.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thinking back on all the projects you've worked on, is there any one that stands out as the most rewarding for you personally, or seeing the impact of your work?
That's hard. There isn't one. I think, it's like picking like your favorite child, right? As a storyteller, I always learn more like after I'm done with a project. So the way that I am doing documentary now is different than I did 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I see my growth as being part of that impact, I guess, in myself, because then I can be more intentional about things. At the very beginning, like you're just worried about getting the project done. Now, getting the project done is easier. And so then I worry about other things. I worry about how are people, who am I reaching? And how are my characters going to feel about who I'm reaching, right? We forget about that, like when we film real people, their lives continue even though the film ends. And so in many ways, not only are you having impact through the audience that's watching it, but now these characters, you've added something to their life. And we as filmmakers need to be conscious of that and responsible for that too.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's very brave of them to tell their story. Okay, this has been wonderful. I do want to ask you, I know we're running out of time here, and I want to ask you, so like thinking big change, global change, that many of us want and our Earth needs, that can be daunting. That can just feel overwhelming. And on this podcast, our audience is small business owners, could be filmmakers, smaller entities. And these smaller entities are often juggling, a lot of different tasks that they have to accomplish. If someone's looking to just like take a step towards positive impact, How do you have any words of wisdom or thoughts on like how to ensure that they're able to do that just like little by little and feel that it is making a difference? Because sometimes it can feel like, really, I'm putting my thing in the recycling bin, and does it matter? And
I mean, everything starts with a plan, right? So really it's about identifying what is it that you want to change. What's the change that needs to happen? And who's most impacted by it? And talk to those people and ask those people, is this a change that you want? Is, can I help? So this kind of comes back to the conversation of like, who's telling the story, right? So like, who are we trying to, what is the change that we're trying to create, to push, to change, and who's impacted by that? And having those individuals, whether it's you and your community or the people around you, maybe you're an outsider in this other space, really building community and conversation and partnership, right, with those people. I think as small business owners and those type of entrepreneurs, like there's always a sense of like community building in your customers. Like, who is your customer? What problems do they have, right? This is sort of like business is about solving problems for people. And so in many ways we're doing that, just sort of like in a different way, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a monetary exchange of goods. It can be a shift in ideas. It can be an uplifting and things like that. So I would encourage people to identify what is that impact, what is that change you want to do, and get in the same room with the people that are impacted by it and have conversations more, because something organically may show up that you can help solve, that you can help provide as a business, to make that shift change. And I think that's where innovation comes to, when you can start thinking about problems from different perspectives and having conversations with different people about it.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And it makes me think, yesterday we launched our diversity advisory board. First meeting is something we've been wanting to do for a long time. It was hard to get it going. We didn't really I don't know how to run a diversity advisory board. So there was a lot of insecurity around starting it and questions. But what I learned from the board meeting yesterday is it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to show up with vulnerability and curiosity and just kind of, see what unfolds and take it step by step. And I think that's applies also to what you're talking about, is just this willingness to be part of the change and openness to what that looks like.
Yeah, 100%. We forget now that I am a father. I'm still learning to be a dad. Having children has taught me, and even sort of the work that I do has taught me, that we have to make mistakes in order to learn. Making mistakes is a part of life, just as is conflict. Both of those things are part of life. So when you make mistakes, you identify that you made a mistake, you apologize, you repair, and you move forward. It's the same thing with a conflict. You have a conflict with somebody else, you sit down with them, you both share your understanding, you listen to the other individual so that you can understand their perspective, you repair, and you move forward. And that's how we grow. As we grow as filmmakers and individuals and business owners, obviously it's unsettling. It doesn't feel great, right? Like, coming back to the emotions of being in conflict with somebody else or making a mistake. We don't want to do that because it doesn't feel good, but it's a natural part of being humans. It's we have to have that feeling, and then we can move on with it. And so I think, if there's anything that I hope people take away from this, is the importance of making mistakes, right? Whether you are starting a diversity board, whether you are trying to engage a community that you've never engaged before, whether you're trying to talk to your own community about issues that you see, but you're unsure of like how other people are going to view it. Things are going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. It's natural for us to feel discomfort as we move out of this space of comfort if we want change to happen.
Thank you. You give me hope for the future. The work that you're doing, the energy you're bringing into the world, like all of it is just beautiful, and really want to appreciate you. Thank you for your time, Sergio. How can people find you and get a hold of you and learn about your work and all the things?
I'm on Instagram, SM Rapu. Also, my company is Mara Films.
So marafilms.com.
marafilms.com. Yeah, that's how I do my work.
Okay, fabulous. Well, thank you for taking the time. It was really a pleasure talking with you, and perhaps we'll continue the conversation one day.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you, Ellen. This is a wonderful conversation.
And now, here's our Impact Tip of the Month. Consider becoming a supporter of one of the numerous grants available to underrepresented filmmakers, such as the AXS Film Fund, whose mission is to support independent filmmakers and nonfiction new media creators of color living with disabilities in their endeavors to tell stories, make films, and create content. Thanks for listening, and make sure to do good in the world this month. If you have questions you'd like us to address on the podcast, you can reach us at info@riveocreative.com. Subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss out on any of our incredible upcoming guests. We'll see you soon at the Riveo Impact Lab.